April 1st, 2026. While the world's financial capitals were distracted by the latest quarterly earnings of Silicon Valley giants, a ghost was haunting the Lualaba province of the Congo, a private entity you've likely never heard of. Virtus Lloyd's Minerals Holdings, or VLMH, quietly finalized a deal that, on the surface, looked like a corporate salvage mission. They bought Chemaf, a debt-ridden mining giant, for a mere $30 million. To the untrained eye, it was a suicide mission. Why would a US-backed consortium pay $30 million to inherit nearly $1 billion in liabilities? Because in the world of high-stakes geopolitics, the price tag is irrelevant. What matters is the trap. For 10 years, China held a death grip on the minerals that power your smartphone, your electric vehicle, and the guidance systems of your nation's missiles. But in a single surgical move, Washington just cut the line. Welcome to the lab. This is Casefile 016, the Cobalt Trap. To understand how the US pulled this off, you have to look at the math. In 2024, the Congo exported over 200,000 tons of cobalt. The market was flooded. Prices were at a 9-year low. This was exactly what Beijing wanted, to starve Western competitors out of the market by making extraction unprofitable for everyone else. But then, the Kinshasa administration changed the rules of the game. Enter ARICOMS. The Congolese regulatory body issued a decree. For 2026, the national export quota is capped at 96,600 tons, a 50% cut, overnight. Now look at who gets the scraps. The Chinese giants, CMOC and Zijin Mining, saw their export capacities decimated. They were built for volume, operating on razor-thin margins that required massive throughput. Now, they are suffocating. By artificially choking the supply, the DRC government drove the price of cobalt from $10 a pound to over $19 in less than a year. This wasn't a sudden surge of resource sovereignty. It was a state-sponsored sabotage of the Chinese monopoly, designed specifically to make the re-entry of Western capital economically viable. VLMH isn't just a mining company. It's a front. Behind the $30 million equity payment lies a massive $720 million capital injection. The money isn't coming from traditional commercial banks. It's flowing from Orion Mine Finance, a group with deep ties to the U.S. State Department's new America First mineral strategy. Inside the Beltway, they call it Project Vault. The U.S. government is no longer just encouraging private investment in Africa. It is actively underwriting it. Undersecretary of State Jacob Hellberg has been the primary architect, framing this as a strategic breakthrough that redirects Congolese output toward American and allied buyers. By guaranteeing offtake for refined materials and providing a political shield for private capital, Washington has turned the Congo into a laboratory for a new kind of warfare, mineral hegemony. But to get this deal through, they had to clear the board. In early 2026, the senior leadership of Gegamines, the DRC's state-owned miner, was purged. The CEO and the chairman were removed by the Tshisekedi administration specifically because they were perceived as obstructing the sale in favor of competing Chinese interests. The message was clear. In the new Congo, you are either with the Atlantic or you're out of a job. But every trap needs a victim, and in the case of Chemaf, the first casualty wasn't actually Chinese. It was European. For nearly a decade, the Geneva-based commodity titan Trafigura held the keys to this specific kingdom. They didn't just trade the ore. They bankrolled the survival of Chemaf's operations during its darkest years. They had an exclusive marketing deal to sell every single gram of cobalt Mutoshi produced. They had sunk hundreds of millions into keeping the heart of this entity beating, waiting for the day the Mutoshi processing plant would finally go online. Then the geopolitical wind changed. In the high-security corridors of Kinshasa, the whisper was that Trafigura, and its European ties, was a remnant of the old world order. When the US-backed Virtus Lloyd's moved in, the exclusive marketing deal was effectively shredded. Trafigura was forced to step back, relegated from being the architect of the supply chain to a mere secured creditor sitting in the back row. This is the hidden face of the America First doctrine. It doesn't just compete with adversaries like Beijing. It displaces traditional allies who are no longer strategically convenient. The message sent to the trading houses of London and Geneva was loud and clear. Step aside. The Pentagon and private equity are writing the checks now. The global market hasn't just been broken. It's been nationalized by interest groups who don't care about Swiss neutrality. Ownership is only half the battle. You have to get the rocks out of the ground and across the ocean. For decades, Congolese cobalt traveled the long route, thousands of miles through congested, Chinese-influenced ports in Durban or Dar es Salaam. Washington decided to build a shortcut, the Lobito Atlantic Railway, a 1,300-kilometer bypass connecting the Copperbelt directly to the Angolan port of Lobito on the Atlantic coast. This isn't just a train line, it's a logistical end run. Backed by a record-breaking $500 million loan from the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation, the Lobito corridor cuts transit times from several weeks to just a few days. More importantly, it's a closed loop. American-financed mines, shipping through American-financed rail to an Atlantic port. It is a supply chain that never has to touch a Chinese-controlled node. The death grip has been bypassed. But while Washington was busy securing the logistics, President Tshisekedi's administration was building a cage. They call it the Digital Sovereignty Initiative. Through ARICOMS, the government has implemented a mandatory AI-driven tracking system for every strategic mineral leaving the country. This is the resource sovereignty trap. On paper, it's a noble effort to stop smuggling and ensure ethical sourcing. But look closer at the mechanics. Every truck, every pallet of cobalt hydroxide, and every train car on the Lobito rail is now under a digital panopticon. By using mandatory checkpoints, satellite monitoring, and blockchain-verified loading supervision, Kinshasa has achieved something no Congolese government has ever had: total visibility. For the US and VLMH, this is a double-edged sword. Yes, it guarantees the compliance that Western ESG standards demand, but it also gives Tshisekedi a kill switch. At any moment, if the political or security payments from the West falter, Kinshasa can simply press a button and freeze the entire Atlantic supply chain. They didn't just give the United States a mine, they gave them a lease on a tether. The cobalt trap works both ways. Don't make the mistake of thinking Beijing is retreating. They are simply moving into the shadows. As their official export quotas were slashed at industrial sites like Tenke-Fungurume, Chinese operators didn't pack up and leave. Instead, they pivoted to what the industry calls the gray market. They are doubling down on the ASM sector, the artisanal and small-scale miners. There are over 200,000 of these independent diggers in the Katanga region, operating in pits where the government's digital eye cannot reach. While VLMH tries to formalize and clean the Mutoshi mine, Chinese buyers are setting up informal collection hubs just across the fence. This is the bipolar reality of 2026. If the US wants the official, high-grade industrial mines, China will take the unofficial, high-volume shadow production. The result is a market that is becoming increasingly volatile, opaque, and dangerous. The cobalt trap hasn't ended the war for resources, it has simply driven the most brutal parts of it underground. While the West celebrates its ethical supply chain in the Atlantic, the gray supply chain to the east is growing larger, fueled by the very inventory depletion that the US strategy intended to cause. In the dark, there is no compliance. There is only tonnage, and there is a price for this kind of security. President Tshisekedi is fighting a war in the east against the Rwandan-backed M23 rebels. He needed hardware, he needed training, he needed stability. In late 2025, he sent a letter to Washington. The deal was simple: security for minerals. The US can't send regular troops. That would be a PR nightmare. So, they sent advisors. And then they sent the professionals. Reports indicate that private military contractors, including entities linked to Eric Prince, have secured contracts to provide logistics and security solutions in these mining zones. We are seeing the return of the mercenary doctrine. We protect the president's regime, the president protects our cobalt, and the 40,000 children still working in the artisanal pits of Katanga. They are simply the compliance premium of the electric revolution. Washington has allocated $22 million to NGOs to fix the child labor problem, but on the ground, the mines are still stained red. The US administration's agenda of holding trading partners accountable is a powerful tool, but in the Congo, accountability is often a flexible term. The final piece of this puzzle is the market itself. By the third quarter of 2026, the structural deficit will be undeniable. The export cap of 96,000 tons is simply not enough to satisfy the projected global demand. This was always the plan. By creating a shortage, Washington ensures that the price of cobalt remains high enough to justify the massive capital injections into VLMH and Orion. They aren't just mining a metal, they are engineering a market equilibrium where China is the odd man out. Which brings us to the endgame. The Cobalt trap is now set. By 2027, the market will enter a structural deficit. Prices will stay high. The US will have its strategic stockpile. China will be forced to draw down its inventories. The era of the global market is over. We have entered the era of the bipolar supply chain. The Congo is no longer a sovereign nation in the eyes of the great powers. It is a fortified warehouse. And in the race to save the planet with green energy, the people of the Katanga region are finding that the more things change, the more they stay exactly the same. Casefile 016 is closed. I'm Tony. This is the Corporate Files Lab. The bigger the empire, the harder the fall. Stay ahead of the curve.